Welcome to the ACC Panic Room. Alongside Lauren Brownlow, I'm Joe Ovies. This is the last one I think we're going to do until July for ACC kickoff. I guess we should probably, start with the important stuff. Football. That's all the ACC meetings were about. Football. How can we make football better? Let's change the schedules. Let's get more revenue, Brownlow. That's what those ACC meetings in Amelia Island were about. I don't think we really got any sort of solutions, but that's certainly all that was discussed.
I was going to say, what'd they settle on? A bake sale? A GoFundMe?
I send that to the chief revenue officer or whatever the job is that they're gonna hire to help shake out as much money as they possibly can for the ACC. It's kind of interesting that it's come to that Jim Phillips, the commissioner of the ACC, talks about chief revenue officers. What do you get? You say bake sales. First thing I thought of, what you could do NFTs. Like, Lauren, how much would you spend on an NFT of Frank Beamer with his arms raised with a 0-0 regulation?
Because that's the type. None of these NFTs have tempted me whatsoever. But when you bring up things like that, and
that's
who
the
would
one.
own that image, things like that matter to me. And it's like, ugh.
But that's kind of where we're at right now with the ACC. There's this obsession with closing the revenue gap with the Big Ten and the SEC. I got news for you. I'm not trying to be an ass here, but no, it's not happening. And I just look. I know the meme is overused. All right. But there's this show on Netflix called I Think You Should Leave. And there's a skit where there's a guy who's driving a hot dog mobile, crashes into a clothing store, and he's dressed up in his hot dog suit.
And the hot dog, it's a hot dog mobile, right?
It's a hot dog mobile, and this guy's in a hot dog suit. And he, the kicker is, and the thing that you see used all the time, the GIF, the meme, is we got to find the guy who did this. It's clearly him. And that's how I envision Jack Swarbrick and anybody at Notre Dame that goes to these ACC meetings and gets to vote on all these things. And they're not a football member of the ACC. Guys, are they all in a meeting just talking around it? Or do they have codes to talk about Notre Dame? If we could just get a school to join us, maybe that could help trigger a rework of our television. I wonder who could that be?
Jack Swarbrick, sitting over there. I could think of some ways that we could earn a lot of extra money, but none of my business, I guess.
He's just sipping his tea, right? What do we I have this. I hope Mike Bray's in this meeting, because we know the Notre Dame basketball coach has no filter whatsoever. When people were asking him about name, image, and likeness, he's like, yeah, I tell the young guys all the time, suck it up and deal with it. That's what the money is for. So I want Mike Bray to be in these meetings. Hey, you football guys keep talking about how to make more money. I got a solution. Hey, Jack, why don't they join the freaking league full time in 2020? I could see Mike Bray doing that.
I don't know if Mike would go that far, though. He knows better than to cross the whole football independence threshold.
Yeah, that might be a problem.
Might not end well for him in South Bend.
So that was the main takeaway from these ACC meetings. And look, I don't envy Jim Phillips, the commissioner of the ACC, trying to shake and wring every single dollar they possibly can to try to close that gap, because there's a trickle-down effect. There's nothing wrong with being third, but if the Big Ten and the SEC are clearing $1 billion apiece, well, that's going to make it really difficult. Not just to hire. It's not about hiring good head football coaches. It's retaining your staff, having those up and coming guys stay on as the offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator.
See, the worry, right, is that now ACC schools will have to work smarter and not, I don't even want to say not harder, but you can't just throw money at it.
No.
And expect to get the best of the best. So now you're going to have to be finding people that are a little bit less well-known, maybe off the radar, and letting guys. But that's the problem, right? Is that now coaches, because this is the overall effect. You can get everything running as well as you want to. But at the end of the day, if you have a coach making X amount at your school and you can only pay him so much, unless he really loves it there and doesn't really care that much about money, he's going to go to one of those schools if he gets good enough. So like, that's another way that people don't think about this mattering. Yes, there are some coaches that are going to stay where they are, but let's be real. Most of them are going to want that next best opportunity. So that's yet another, like it used to be that you don't leave P5 for P5 unless the difference is really big. But now you can see somebody going to one of those lesser jobs in one of those other leagues if they can pay them more.
Hey, look, Lincoln Riley changed the game. All right. You can leave a name program like Oklahoma and all the money that they've got.
That's the thing.
To go leave for another gig in Southern Cal, which has even more money. So the money is so astronomical right now that really changed the nature. Like anything is possible when it comes to coaches leaving for other places, not just for the NFL. So look, I'm not trying to make light of the situation, but it's really easy too. You can't buy enough ACC network products to close that gap. You can't sell Frank Beamer NFTs. You can't what are we going to invest in Bitcoin? We saw how that's playing out. The market's
by the way, like it's worth mentioning the Notre Dame thing. Would it close some of the gap? I mean, yeah, technically, probably, but like it would not make it up. But
it's the only thing you got.
It's really like literally
at this point, everything else is chump change. You might as well do that bake sale, right? Which makes some of the conversation with the football scheduling even more frustrating. Like going into last week, it seemed like a foregone conclusion that they were going to go to this 3-3-5 scheduling model. Shout out to Joe Giglio, who brought that to the ACC's attention back in 2014 and kind of got a shoulder shrugger like, oh, that's interesting, and then just dismissed it. Now it looks like they're going to do this 3-3-5. It looks like Jim Phillips is the one pushing this. Coaches don't necessarily want it. I mean, obviously the Atlantic coaches want it because they want to get away from Clemson, but I could see why Bubba Cunningham, the AD at North Carolina, doesn't want to get rid of divisions. He wants 9 conference games. But that's not the point. It's not about the individual school and your competitiveness. It's about what fans want. Yeah. And it's also about putting together a better television product.
I was going to say, really, at the end of the day, it's more about what TV wants, but they're not going to get as involved necessarily directly in that as your fans will. They'll tell you if they don't want to go to a game or whatever. But I mean, yeah, you do have to schedule for TV, and it's the reality that we're in now. I think the only thing that could potentially change is if things get so boring, right? At the top somehow, like if the other leagues really do fall so far behind that you're gonna see like that much of a gap between the haves and have-nots that the TV people are like, well, I get that people get bored. Like honestly, that's the only thing I can think of that because there already was a huge gap, but people could convince themselves that everybody had a chance. The moment that goes out the window, right? The moment that goes, like, that's the reason that March Madness is so much more, like, overall, it's a better brand, more recognizable brand than the college football postseason because everybody technically has a chance. In the college football season, we already know that's not true. But if you take away even the illusion of it, like, even the illusion that, like, well, if you work really hard and get your program, no, like, people are going to tire of it.
Yeah. No, look, we just saw it in this past NCAA tournament where you can get a St. Peter's versus North Carolina. You're not going to see that in college football, in the college football playoff. Even if you expand the college football playoff, you're probably
just add more of the other teams.
You're going to get more SEC teams. You're going to get more Big Ten teams. You get a handful of those Group of 5 teams, and maybe they'll have an early knockoff. But as you get further along,
and this is why you and I both, by the way, have continuously pushed back at this notion put out there by national people that somehow it's in the ACC and Pac-12 and Big Ten and Pac-12's best interest to like go along with this playoff expansion. And sorry, it isn't. So it's not. Like it's like they should all just fall in line with what, like, no, they shouldn't.
Well, I mean, look, if you ask Paul Feinbaum, that's exactly what they should do. Like
Feinbaum, he's not the only one saying that though, and
he's not the only one. But he clearly has a lot of, he gets the biggest platform. He's on the big stick, all that stuff, and he's like, there was an interview that I think he did on Sirius XM Radio this week where he talked about how the ACC is a diminished conference and that Jim Phillips' leadership isn't all that great. It's
so why should they do whatever the conference in charge wants them to do then? Like, that doesn't make sense.
That's what it comes down to. It's like Feinbaum's still miffed that the college football playoff didn't go through the way that the SEC wanted it to go through.
Right.
And that's why we're here. That's why the ACC is getting ripped. But the ACC is using the college football playoff as the last leverage point it has. It's like the last thing.
That's the only thing. It's the only thing that they have. That is all that the ACC has. And so, like, to see anybody suggest somehow that they shouldn't use that It's kind of silly to me, really, because
Yeah.
so what else do they have? Can they just ask nicely for some of their money? Like, no one's going to give them anything.
Let me hold $5.
Right. Can I hold like Maryland's exit fee from you for a little while till payday? Yeah.
Anyway, so that's where we are. We had meetings, not a lot of solutions. If anything changes, obviously we can discuss it. Same thing, even like the smallest things that you think would be resolved by now. Like, and again, I think this is I want to be abundantly clear when I say this. Where the ACC offices are is really just not a big topic for me, but it's a little bit of a point of obsession.
I think
on social media.
I understand why it doesn't bother you.
Yeah.
But I think it is interesting for a lot of reasons.
Well, it's gotten interesting to me because it's gone on forever. Like,
right.
What's there to decide? Okay, Orlando. Well, clearly Orlando was some sort of leverage play to get whatever sweetheart deals they could out of Charlotte, potentially even Greensboro. The majority of ACC institutions want to stay in North Carolina, so I don't see why this is necessary.
Well, that's weird because you know what? Fans of other schools always suggest they don't. So, but that's weird because most of the schools in the league are outside of North Carolina. Last I had seen. I was told that it's only the North Carolina schools dictating the way everybody else thinks.
It's not. That's the funny thing is, it's not just the North Carolina schools that are dictating this. Of course, I mean, if we really want to talk about saving, here's another way to close the revenue gap. Why are you spending all this money on office spaces? Why can't you just go remote? Pac-12 went remote. You want to save some money, get a little bit of extra coins, save for a rainy day. All right, well then just go remote. You can save on office space. You can save on all that travel, right? You don't have to worry about having 100 some odd people in an office. What's the big deal? I know these are silly things, but again, it becomes a story not because of the move. It becomes a story because it's been months since they said they were going to come up with some sort of decision, and then they still haven't come up with a decision. You're like, well, what are you trying to parse? Like, just do it already, one way or the other. Another exciting offseason of the ACC. Well, that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the ACC Panic Room. We will see y'all later in the summer.